A little girl gently tugged at Karoline's sleeve, pointed at her cross necklace, and asked a question that was both simple and profound, bringing tears to her eyes. The community center in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee was alive with energy. The delightful aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries wafted through the air, blending seamlessly with the lively chatter of the townspeople who had come together for the evening's meet and greet. It was the sort of place where everyone was familiar with one another, where the pace of life allowed for genuine connections to flourish. Karoline Leavitt stood near a folding table stacked with pamphlets, warmly greeting guests as she shook hands and answered questions. She had always found joy in gatherings such as these, not for the spotlight, but for the engaging discussions, the genuine, candid tales that individuals confided in her, the serene instances of truth that brought back to her mind the reasons behind her actions. While engaging in conversation with an older woman regarding local schools, she sensed a gentle tug at her sleeve. Initially, she dismissed it, but then the tug returned once more. Steadfast and compact, she turned, casting her gaze downward. A charming little girl stood there, just shy of 7, her chestnut curls beautifully framing her round, freckled face. She held onto the hem of her floral dress. Her wide brown eyes were fixed on Karoline's necklace. Karoline knelt down, bringing herself to the child's eye level. "Welcome," she greeted gently, her smile radiating warmth. "May I ask for your name?" The girl paused for a moment, then responded in a soft voice. "Welcome, Samantha. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Samantha." The child's gaze remained steady. Instead, she directed a small, slightly trembling finger toward the delicate gold cross that rested against Karoline's collarbone. "Can you share the significance behind your necklace?" The atmosphere in the room remained lively, not quite falling into silence. However, for Karoline, the atmosphere changed. The inquiry was straightforward, pure-hearted, and yet it bore a significance she hadn't anticipated. For years, that cross had nestled against her skin, near her heart. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It served as a reminder, a symbol of something greater than her own existence. For the first time in quite a while, someone was inviting her to share her thoughts on it. She parted her lips to respond, yet silence enveloped her. Instead, her thoughts wandered to a night she had spent years attempting to erase from memory. Yet, certain memories linger on, regardless of how fervently you might wish for their departure. Karoline blinked, remaining in her kneeling position before the little girl. Yet, her thoughts wandered to a time long gone, to a moment that had profoundly influenced her in ways she could never have foreseen. At just 19, she was a freshman at Belmont University in Nashville, filled with excitement about her future, yet grappling with challenges that she kept to herself. In those days, she was navigating the challenges of classes, juggling 2 part-time jobs, all while grappling with that persistent feeling of inadequacy, as if she didn't quite fit in. She was brought up in a household that cherished faith, yet during that chapter of her journey, it seemed far away. She participated in the rituals, attending Sunday services and offering whispered prayers before bedtime. Yet, it all seemed devoid of substance, as if her words were echoing in a vacant space. And then, the phone call arrived. Just after midnight, the dorm room was softly illuminated by the gentle glow of her laptop screen. As she was diligently preparing for her exam, her phone suddenly vibrated. She hesitated for a moment, yet an inner voice urged her to respond. As soon as her mother's voice reached her ears, she understood instantly. Her grandmother, the woman who had taught her the art of baking biscuits from scratch, who always carried the scent of lavender and spoke of faith with a tangible warmth, was no longer with them. A sudden heart attack. There was no warning given. Farewell is not in our plans. Karoline had a hazy recollection of the next few hours. She remembered the soft, muffled cries of her roommate nearby, the chilling emptiness in her heart, and the heavy burden of understanding that she would never again hear her grandmother's voice. For the first time in her life, she experienced a profound sense of solitude. The following morning, she went about her routine, packed a bag, and secured a bus ticket for her journey home. Yet her hands seemed to drift away from her body, as if she were an observer in someone else's existence. Upon her arrival at her childhood home, an unsettling feeling washed over her. The chair belonging to her grandmother remained unoccupied. The atmosphere was dense, laden with unspoken words. That night, restless and seeking comfort, she found herself in her grandmother's bedroom. The delightful aroma of lavender remained, embracing the blankets and pillows with its soothing presence. A solitary item on the nightstand drew her attention. A lovely gold chain that exudes elegance. The cross pendant gently lies upon the aged pages of a Bible. That necklace was a cherished part of her grandmother's daily life, worn with love every single day. Karoline picked it up, her fingers gliding over the cool metal. Something about it made her pause in her steps. In her palm, the weight of it carried a unique sensation. It felt as though it transcended mere jewelry, embodying something deeper. It was a concept she wasn't quite prepared to grasp just yet. Sometimes, faith arrives at your doorstep before you've had a chance to prepare for it. Karoline found herself in the soft glow of her grandmother's bedroom, holding the cross necklace with such fervor that its edges dug into her palm. She anticipated a sense of comfort, yet what she encountered was anger. How could God take someone so full of love, so steady in her faith, and leave Karoline here, drowning in questions she didn't know how to answer? She had listened to others share their experiences of discovering tranquility amidst loss. Let's talk about the idea that everything unfolds for a purpose. However, that evening, everything felt utterly confusing. She gracefully slipped the chain over her head, allowing the pendant to rest elegantly against her chest. Initially, it was quite chilly, a bit foreign to the senses. Then, as if the burden had become overwhelming, she finally let it all out. She collapsed onto the bed, her body trembling as tears streamed down her face. It was not a serene or composed display of tears. It was a profound sorrow that tore through you, leaving you exposed and gasping for air. She nestled into herself, resting her forehead against the soft fabric of her grandmother's quilt, the lingering scent of lavender enveloping her. She found herself uncertain of how long she had been lying there. But eventually, she whispered softly, perhaps to herself, perhaps to a higher power. If such a presence was indeed attentive, if you're truly out there, I'd love to hear from you. I need to sense something. Anything at all. At this moment, I am experiencing a complete absence of feelings. The quiet that ensued was overwhelming. There's no divine announcement, no unexpected wave of warmth or insight. Just the gentle chorus of crickets serenading outside and the soft, familiar creaks of the aging house finding its place. She might have felt a bit silly. She ought to have risen, refreshed her face, and encouraged herself to carry on. However, she chose not to. Instead, she remained there, patiently awaiting. And then, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. It wasn't a voice or a vision. Not the sort of thing you come across in tales. It was a subtle change. A slight shift that was hardly noticeable yet undeniably present. Her heart, which had been racing just moments ago, began to slow down. The tightness in her chest remained, yet it eased ever so slightly. Her breathing, once ragged and uneven, began to steady, and somewhere deep inside, where only she could feel it, a gentle whisper of warmth nestled into the coldest parts of her. That wasn't quite the response we were looking for. That wasn't quite the answer we were looking for. Well, it certainly was something. For the first time since she had picked up the phone that night, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She gently grasped the cross necklace, her fingers tracing its outline as she gazed at it through tear-filled eyes. It had been her grandmother's, yet in that moment, it seemed as though it had chosen her instead. She was uncertain about what would happen next. She was uncertain if her faith would ever return to the simplicity and ease it once held in her childhood. A time of unquestioning belief. However, she was certain of one thing. She had company, and that was sufficient to continue onward. Faith is not just a fleeting moment. Welcome to this incredible journey. At times, the most challenging aspect is moving forward to the next step. The days following her grandmother's passing were akin to wading through water. Each moment slow, heavy, and filled with uncertainty. Karoline moved through the gathering, exchanging faint smiles with relatives who gently patted her shoulder, nodding in response to the condolences that seemed to blend into one another. However, there was a noticeable change this time. She continued to have questions, and that familiar ache in her chest lingered whenever she contemplated the finality of it all. Yet, each time she touched the delicate cross resting against her collarbone, a sense of steadiness washed over her. She arrived back in Belmont a week later, stepping off the bus with a heart that was mending, though still carrying some scars. She had anticipated the loneliness to wash over her once more, but instead, there was something entirely different, a serene power. One evening, about a month later, Karoline found herself in the student lounge, casually flipping through the pages of a textbook, though her mind was elsewhere. A classmate named Brandon, whom she hardly knew beyond their shared lectures, sat across from her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "How are you doing?" she inquired. Initially, there was no response from him. With a trembling breath, he softly shared, "My dad passed away last night." Karoline stood still. She could have expressed, "I'm truly sorry," or "That sounds incredibly difficult." Yet those words seemed insubstantial, as if they might easily slip through the fissures of his sorrow and vanish. Instead, she reached for her necklace, gently rubbing the pendant between her fingers, a familiar gesture she had repeated countless times since that night in her grandmother's bedroom. She shared that she lost her grandma last month. "While I may struggle to find the perfect words, I truly understand the feeling of believing that nothing will ever make sense again." Brandon took a deep breath, his jaw tightening as he blinked quickly. "Absolutely." With a moment of uncertainty, she removed the necklace and extended it towards him, his brows furrowing in confusion. "Oh, I'm afraid I can't accept that." "You're not taking it," she remarked gently. "I'm just going to borrow it, until you feel that refreshing sense of ease return." He remained silent initially, simply gazing at her as if she had presented him with something far more significant than just a piece of jewelry. With trembling hands, he accepted it. Karoline was unaware at that time, but that moment, that simple gesture of kindness, would mark the beginning of countless more to come. Sometimes, it's not about having all the answers when it comes to faith. There are moments when your presence can make all the difference for someone who feels adrift. Faith has a remarkable ability to return when you least anticipate it. Karoline's voice took on a gentle quality as she returned her focus to the little girl before her, who stood wide-eyed and silent. She could still feel the weight of that moment years ago, when she handed over something that had once been her own anchor. With the hope that it would help someone else stay afloat, she looked down at the delicate cross around her neck now, the one she had purchased to take the place of the one she had given away. However, that initial necklace, the one that once belonged to her grandmother, never returned to her possession. Brandon had held onto it. A year after she had lent it to him, he mentioned that he wasn't quite ready to return it just yet. She simply smiled and said, "Then it's yours." And now, years later, here she was, responding to a question from a little girl who had no idea how profoundly that small piece of gold had influenced her journey. Karoline inhaled deeply, finding her calm. "My grandmother gifted me a necklace just like this one," she said, her fingers gently brushing against the cross. "Initially, I perceived it merely as adornment, a lovely accessory to don. However, following her passing, I came to understand that it encompassed something far more significant. It brought to mind that even in moments of solitude, I was never truly alone." The little girl's eyes sparkled with a familiar glimmer that Karoline instantly recognized. An unspoken connection, a wisdom that surpasses her age. The girl whispered, "My mom used to wear one." Her delicate fingers reached up to her own neck, where there was nothing but smooth skin. She needed to part with it. She mentioned that food was a greater necessity than jewelry. Karoline felt a tightening in her chest. There was no need for her to inquire about the girl's mother. The tremor in the child's voice spoke volumes. She moved forward without a moment's pause. With deliberate grace, she reached behind her neck, unclasping the chain. The little girl's eyes sparkled with wonder as Karoline took her hand and delicately placed the necklace in her palm. "It's yours now," Karoline said gently. The young lady gazed at the cross, her lip quivering slightly. "However, that's not something I can do." "Absolutely, you can," Karoline interjected with a warm smile. "And whenever you wear it, keep in mind that, no matter what happens, you are always accompanied." The young girl's fingers gently grasped the necklace, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. A soft sob slipped from her lips as she propelled herself forward, encircling Karoline's neck with her tiny arms. Karoline embraced her tightly, sensing the little one's delicate body tremble in her arms. In the distance, The whispers of the crowd had faded into silence. The atmosphere in the room became heavy, filled with an unspoken presence. Something truly special. Yet, there are times when the most impactful experiences require no words whatsoever. The little girl clung to Karoline as if time itself had paused. As she finally pulled away, she gently wiped her damp cheeks with the back of her hand. Her fingers still curled protectively around the necklace. Karoline observed the emotions dancing across her youthful face. Thankfulness, astonishment, an unexpressed feeling that only a young one, who has experienced far too much at an early age, could truly grasp. A woman gracefully stepped forward from the crowd, her hands quivering ever so slightly. Karoline had an instinct that was undeniable, even before she uttered a word. This was the mother of the girl. I don't know what to say, the woman said, her voice heavy with feeling. Her eyes, tired yet warm, danced between Karoline and her daughter. Every night before bed, she shares her thoughts about that necklace. The one I needed to part with. I never imagined she would have another one. Karoline offered a warm smile. Now she certainly does. The mother took a deep breath, her lips tightening as she let out a shaky exhale. Thank you, she said softly. This holds greater significance than you might realize. Karoline understood perfectly what it signified, for she had previously experienced that very moment. The one where she was on the receiving end of something that felt like hope. Especially when hope was the most elusive thing to grasp. As the atmosphere hung thick with anticipation, the once motionless crowd started to stir. Some individuals dabbed at their eyes, while others shared subtle looks with one another. A few older women placed their hands over their hearts, nodding knowingly as if they shared an unspoken understanding. And then, an unexpected twist unfolded. A gentleman from the rear made his way to the front. He stood tall, his attire showing signs of wear, and his hands bore the calluses of a lifetime dedicated to hard work. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small wad of cash, and placed it gently in the mother's hand. For groceries, he said simply. The mother gasped, shaking her head. Oh, I can't, please, he interrupted, his voice steady but kind. It's not about charity, it's simply the appropriate course of action. And just like that, the floodgates swung wide open. A generous individual came forward, presenting a gift card for a nearby grocery store. Another woman gently removed a small bracelet from her wrist and offered it to the little girl, whispering, something pretty to complement your necklace. As we gathered here today, a wave of kindness washed over us, with each individual contributing in their own unique way. Those small, subtle gestures, while seemingly insignificant alone, combined to create a truly remarkable force in our midst. Karoline stepped back, observing as unfamiliar faces transformed into something more meaningful. This had shifted beyond her now. It truly never was. It all began with a simple question from a little girl, leading to something much larger and more profound. Sometimes, faith goes beyond mere belief. At times, it's all about taking action. However, the most impactful moments are not merely spontaneous. They depart, yet something remains, a presence that endures well beyond the fleeting moment. As the crowd gradually made their way out, Karoline lingered for a moment, observing the little girl holding the necklace close to her heart. The mother gently clasped her daughter's hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, sharing a soft whisper meant just for them. It was a subtle exchange, almost lost in the gentle whispers of the room. Yet Karoline understood that this moment would be etched in their memories for all time. And if she were to be truthful, it would linger with her as well. She entered the community center anticipating little more than a handshake, a few conversations, and perhaps some courteous applause. Instead, she found herself reflecting on a lesson she had absorbed years prior. Sometimes, it's the tiniest moments that carry the greatest significance. That little girl was unaware, but she had gifted Karoline something equally significant in return. She had reminded her of the importance of faith and the value of kindness, particularly the kind that expects nothing in return, which holds immense worth. She had once believed that faith meant possessing all the answers. That evening in her grandmother's cozy bedroom, she pleaded for a single, unmistakable sign. As she matured, a realization began to dawn on her. Faith is not merely about knowledge, it's about the act of trusting. believing that in the toughest times, even when solutions seem elusive, there remains a glimmer of hope to discover. And sometimes, that light appears as a tiny hand gently pulling at your sleeve. Karoline let out a breath, a surprising warmth enveloping her chest. As she began to turn away, a gentle tug on her sleeve halted her in her tracks. The young girl gazed up at her once more, her fingers gently wrapped around the cross. "Miss Karoline, may I have your attention?" she inquired gently. Karoline bent down again. "Absolutely, darling." The girl paused for a moment, then replied, "I believe my mom's right. You gifted me something far beyond a necklace." Karoline beamed with joy. "And you offered me so much more than just a question." The little girl radiated joy, then pivoted and dashed back to her mother. Karoline observed their departure, feeling a sense of lightness in her heart that she hadn't experienced in quite some time. She was unaware of the challenges that awaited that little girl, or perhaps for her mother. She couldn't assure them that life would always be a walk in the park. However, what she could do, what they all could do, was ensure that no one ever felt isolated in their journey. And sometimes, a simple act of kindness was all that was needed. She gracefully turned back toward the exit, stepping out into the refreshing coolness of the evening air. The sky showcased a stunning palette of deep blues and gentle oranges. As the first stars began to twinkle into existence above, as she strolled toward her car, her eyes fell upon the place where her necklace had lain just hours before. It had vanished, yet, in that moment, she experienced a sense of completeness like never before. Some moments linger in our hearts for eternity. Occasionally, it's the little things that matter most, a thoughtful word, a modest present, a shared moment of empathy, that can truly transform a life. So the next time you find an opportunity to extend kindness, embrace it. One can never truly tell whose heart may be in greatest need of it. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share it with others. Feel free to share it. Please share it with others. Shine brightly for others when they need it most. To stay updated with more impactful stories, be sure to subscribe. The finest tales are those that reconnect us with our true selves.